Can I tell you guys a joke?
Absolutely,
Please.
Josh.
Okay. In Russia, the most popular meal is the bread sandwich. That's 2 slices of bread with a slice of bread in between. You have the same thing here. It's called a Big Mac.
What a country. This is Hoot and Holler, a podcast about the Ozarks.
I've got one more. In Russia, yep means sex. When I came here to America, I heard everyone saying, yep, yep, yep. I said to myself, what a country! These jokes and more in America on 6 rubles a day by Yakov Smirnoff, which I found at a Goodwill today for $1.
Wow. So we were talking... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm surprised that Yakov has not been, canceled for being a creep yet. I don't know, it's just something. He just gives off a vibe.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, when you're so established and you're not on the road, he's not a touring comedian, he's got probably a power structure in place to keep that kind of stuff suppressed.
Yeah, probably.
We were just talking yesterday that Yakov is basically the biggest name left in Branson. All the country music guys are dead or gone, right? I think even the Oak Ridge Boys stopped playing down here. Ray Stevens has the Cabaret Theater over in Nashville now. Jim Stafford, I think, has basically retired. I think he was doing limited engagements, and then coronavirus, I think, just got him out of the game. The theater's mostly sitting empty there. So Yakov Smirnoff, catchphrase comedian from the 1980s, whose star burned up by 1989, is now the premier entertainment force in Branson, Missouri.
Yakov made a huge mistake by not pivoting and appealing to liberals during the last few years.
Oh yeah, he could have made a killing if he had gone blue anon instead of MAGA, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like his relevancy just completely died after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, because those jokes, every year that passed from the fall of the Soviet Union, those jokes got less and less relevant and landed with less people. And yet he was still doing it. He's still doing the old Soviet reversal. In Soviet Russia, COVID catches you. Yeah.
I don't know. I think Yakov was still relevant just because and it was in the 90s. He was on King of the Hill, and that's pretty high media for me. I love that Yakov is part of the King of the Hill canon.
But so is Ray Mangione, and he's, it's the same level of stardom.
Okay, so I didn't know that Chuck Mangione was a real person until...
I didn't either.
Yeah, I thought he was a King of the Hill character until I was doing a show with a comic named Daryl Felsberg, and his walk-up music is a song by Chuck Mangione, and he told me about it, and I was like, oh, that's funny, I love King of the Hill too. And he's like, no, I mean, really, that's not my walk-up music. And I was like, oh, Chuck Mangione's a real person, huh? And he's like, yeah. And he's not ever invited me to work back with him again. So,
I mean, I imagine there's somebody who saw King of the Hill go to Branson, Missouri, and just thought it was a King of the Hill thing, and then later learned that Branson, Missouri was a real place.
Yeah, probably.
Let me ask you if this joke lands as well as Yakov thinks it did in 1987. Police. America has many wonderful things we never had in Russia, like warning shots.
God
wow.
Damn.
Yeah, that one doesn't really hold up, does it?
I don't think it really held up well at the time, but
I
Right.
feel like he's probably still telling that joke, and in Branson, it is hitting.
Well, here we are. It's the Biden era. This is our first episode full of the full Biden era. Our last episode dropped on Inauguration Day. We'll call that the capstone to the Trump administration years. So welcome to the Biden era.
I mean, we're back to brunch. We don't have to worry about anything at all.
It's true. I had a slice of cold pizza at 11:30 today. I am back to brunch.
Yeah, I'm sure, Joe Biden seems like a competent, capable adult. And I'm sure things will be fine. And I really, really, really love all of the hot takes that we are getting. Well, honestly, they're probably wet takes because people are dripping wet for Joe Biden for some reason.
God.
Jesus.
Fucking,
come on.
Yeah,
I know.
Leg cramp Twitter going off. I saw all the ones about like
oh God,
him and Dr. Jill like breaking in the White House and old Joe laying pipe on inauguration night and shit.
That is so.
And it's like some of the most cursed, disturbed. Like, please seek fucking help.
Like you've never at least thought about Joe Biden digging down his wife.
Were I to think about Joe Biden dicking down Dr. Jill Biden, like a 80-year-old having sex with his 70-year-old wife or whatever, I certainly would not fucking share the details of said fucking daydream in the public forum. That's insane.
And okay,
I'm not trying to kink shame anybody here, but what the fuck are you people doing?
And listen, anybody that follows me on Twitter knows I am a classic oversharer. There's nothing that I will not share on the internet. If I were having those fantasies about any politician, I would just simply keep them to myself. It's so
any politician
weird. Like, and like it's like when you see weirdo dudes getting thirsty over AOC, I'm like, oh man, no. And it's not that she's not attractive or anything like that, but it's just like, I don't want to read that. And also, Joe Biden's a war criminal. Why are you getting horny over a war criminal?
I want to say that Hope Hicks isn't technically a politician, so
neither is McMuffin Cobb
yeah, exactly.
or any of your other problematic crushes.
Yeah, Josh, there are problems with the women that you get thirsty about online, but it's nothing to do with politics. It's just it's more of a therapy probably related.
Yeah, there's a deep-seated pathology in both cases, but I think Joshua's dealing with something slightly different.
Yeah,
I can fix them.
How do you guys feel about the calls for unity? I love the idea that I'm supposed to unify with white supremacists and neo-Nazis and fascists in the name of a successful Biden administration. I just love it so much.
And worse than all of those groups, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, God.
Yeah, it's the institutional Republicans who are all like essentially as unhinged, eliminationist, fucking racist as their more virulent, like terrible MAGA cousins or whatever. But they're the like adults in the party or whatever, and so he's trying to reach out. I mean, he and McConnell were former colleagues, and fucking these people don't take anything more serious than their former colleagues' camaraderie in the Senate and stuff. So I don't know. The funniest thing about the calls for unity is it's given these Republicans this insane talking point that anytime Biden does something that they don't like, that he's like, oh, big show of unity. You know, how are we supposed to heal and move forward as a country if we can't drill for oil in the Anwar?
Yeah.
Yeah, a very bad play to give them that, because I remember an election that Trump lost by whatever million number of votes last time, but won because of the Electoral College. They just kept saying elections have consequences for 4 years. Anytime they just rammed anything through.
Yeah, there's no bloodthirsty ruthlessness on the center right, center left Democratic coalition, and they desperately need it right now. They need fucking like Sherman and they instead of Neville Chamberlain, you know, like in many ways this shit just has to be burned to the ground, at least on the institutional front. There are certainly individuals who can and will be saved, brought back, and maybe even turned back into redeemable members of society. But as far as like the structural shit going on, like you have to fucking march to the sea and leave a line of destruction behind you.
I agree.
But we won't. We'll equivocate on the filibuster, and
Here's what I think they're doing is they are going to force the Republicans to oppose something that should obviously pass that's popular, and then they're going to say, well, now we're going to eliminate the filibuster. I think that's what they think they're going to do.
That would show more foresight and political acumen than we've seen out of the Democratic congressional leadership. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, we'll see. I would be ecstatic if they did that, but
what they should do is right now put a bill on the floor just stripped away from the rest of the package, the $1,400 checks, because I don't think they can get 60 votes for that, and it is popular. And then they could say, well, if you're not going to help people, we're not going to do this for 4 years and eliminate the filibuster.
Is the consensus now that this bill won't be able to go through budget reconciliation? Because if they go through budget reconciliation, then they only need a bare majority. They only need 51 votes.
Well, what Biden's saying now is he doesn't want to go through reconciliation. He wants to go through just the proper channels.
Classic Sun Tzu taught us that you always follow the path of most resistance.
Yes.
That's the path to victory. Yeah.
Yeah, just imagine McConnell doing any of this.
Well, Josh Hawley's been just catching shit left and right, but he hasn't really made the news lately. But our boy down south in Arkansas recently got a little write-up, a little press.
Oh, right? Senator bitch. Old Tom Cotton.
Old Tom Cotton.
So I want to start out by saying thank you to the dozens of people who sent me this article. I do love that I am known for shit talking Tom Cotton on Twitter, and it makes my heart happy when anybody sends me this. Also, if this were honestly anybody else, I wouldn't say shit. I think it's that because it's titles that I don't know that like really matters like in the long run. But I hate Tom Cotton with such a fiery, burning desire in my heart that any time that we can talk shit about him, I absolutely want to. So, and I remember this back when Tom Cotton was originally running for the Senate. He ran on like this decorated, war hero platform. He was in the Army. First he went to Harvard Law School, and then after W was reelected, he joined the Army to serve his country. Whatever.
Psychopath behavior.
Real psychopath shit.
He looks incredibly funny in the photos I've seen of him in his uniform.
Yeah.
I don't understand how he passed physicals. Like, you have to imagine that there is like a maximum neck length to be a infantryman, because you can't catch cover whenever you got a fucking neck like that, man.
And just I won't get too off topic on this because it is one of my favorite topics in the world. But my friend TJ said that he was talking to his friend down in Georgia, and he said, oh yeah, y'all weren't kidding about how long that neck was. And I was like, I'm so glad other people see it.
Yeah, those pictures of him next to Kelly Loeffler is just like a fucking herd of giraffes going through through Savannah, Georgia.
So while he was in the Army, he was a quote-unquote decorated hero, including 2 commendation medals, a Bronze Star, and a Ranger tab, which sounds like one of the energy drinks from the 70s. But apparently, so basically when you get a Ranger tab, that means you went to Ranger school. Which, it sounds ridiculous.
Right.
I'm going to Ranger school. But that doesn't mean you're an Army Ranger. To be an Army Ranger, you have to serve in,
serve in one of the Ranger divisions.
And apparently, if you don't serve in that division, you can't call yourself an Army Ranger. You're not supposed to. I guess there's a little, like, gray area between it, but it is, like, generally in the Army, if you didn't serve, I think it was, like, in the 75th division, you're not, like, an Army Ranger. So, people have been asking about this, and in 2012, he told the Hot Springs Sentinel Record, "My experience as a U.S. Army Ranger in Iraq and Afghanistan and my experience in business will put me in a very good condition." And the year before, he told Talk Politics in a video interview that he became an infantry officer and an Army Ranger. And in 2012, he identified as a battle-tested leader who volunteered to be an Army Ranger. I think...
yeah, I mean, this is a similar phenomenon to the fake seals, like the frogman shit, which is like the stolen valor thing. Like as far as I know, like the first real organization dedicated to like rooting out people stealing valor was out of people claiming to be Navy SEALs, and a lot of those people either went through SEALs training or trained with SEALs, but never were an accepted part. They never served as a Navy SEAL, right? And then, of course, there are people who just like lie about it entirely. Yeah. but it's the same thing. It's like saying I worked at a restaurant that earned a Michelin star or whatever, when it's like, I don't know, your local Michelin dealer gave you a 1-star review or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing about all of this is Salon is the one who wrote this article about it, and they reached out for comment from Cotton's office, and Cotton spokesperson Caroline Tabler told Salon in an email, "Senator Cotton graduated from Ranger School, and he is more of a Ranger than a Salon reporter like you ever will be."
It's definitely a spectrum, you know. But it's not binary. Everything that's not binary is binary with conservatives, and then everything that is binary is a broad spectrum. So yeah, he's more of a Ranger than you are, you pansy.
Exactly. Tabler then asked to arrange an off-the-record call in that email, and Salon declined. And they go on about some of the differences, but I think one of the most important things here is it should be noted that Ranger School and the 75th Ranger Regiment are completely different entities, under completely different commands with completely different missions. One is not needed for the other, said a Ranger veteran. And here's the thing, it's like, ultimately, like, if I met somebody and they're like, "Oh yeah, like, you know, I was in the Army Rangers," I'd be like, "Cool." And it wouldn't really matter to me if they only went to Ranger School or whatever, because I spent the weekend crying about Teen Mom on my couch. Like, it doesn't, like, it's fine. But for Tom Cotton, who is so, I'm trying to find the words to describe it. He's such like an America first, you know, you're not going to disrespect the troops in front of me. It's fucking rich coming from somebody who like spends time like tearing down other people and like running on this record of, you know, being this decorated war hero. And it's like, why do you need to lie about that? And I think it is deeply because I don't think he went to Ranger School. I don't know that he was an Army Ranger. I do believe, honestly, that he is a robot from the Army. So I think he's just trying to cover up.
Boston Dynamics. He's a advanced DARPA project. Started in the early days of DARPA. Slowly developed over the years.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I don't really have like a ton else to say on that other than what I feel like I'm always kind of saying about Tom Cotton, and I will say until even after he's out of office, Tom Cotton can absolutely eat shit. every day of the week, before or after his birthday
Here.
cake. I don't care when.
Bake it into his cake. Do it like in The Help with that pie. Just bake the shit
Listen,
right in.
I could make that happen.
Shit cake.
But yeah, yeah, buy one of the sheet cakes that his wife allegedly buys at the grocery store. Yeah, so Tom Cotton can eat shit with his Ranger tab, and fuck off forever because I hate him so much. And I can't wait to see what hot takes we get from him in the upcoming weeks.
Oh, well, he was one of the guys who did the he says he wants unity and they're killing Arkansas jobs or whatever because he struck down Keystone Pipeline day 1 or day 2 or whatever. And so a pipe supplier in Little Rock is facing layoffs of like 30 people.
Yeah.
So he made that into by these people want unity, then they're gonna have to not do anything at all.
If you want unity, it's gonna be on my terms, or as an Army Ranger, I will drone strike you. Ugh.
Which just makes it even more insane to fucking pursue.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, you know, with Biden as president, which he is, it does seem a little insane for us not to pursue these things that we want, because in 2022 we're probably not going to have a majority anymore, and I say the Democrats are not going to have a majority anymore, and it's going to be harder to pass these things. It's like, if they're gonna fucking lose, which Democrats really know how to lose fucking elections, like nobody I've ever seen, it's almost impressive, at least make it something worth losing over. Like, don't sit here and try to appeal to Tom Cotton's long-necked ass. Try to help the people of your country. If you get voted out of office for it, then, like, good for you. Like, at least, I don't know, that's probably another topic for another day, but
yeah, I mean, the thing that leads you into losing in 2022 is not getting rid of the filibuster, is letting McConnell follow through with his obstructionist agenda, and then being painted as ineffectual in a year and a half, and that's how you lose. That's how you lose. If you exercise power and you're ruthless with it now, and you get through these like fucking pittance of a social democratic reform shit, like raising the minimum wage and stuff, then you have the shot to like look like you actually help and care about the American people when it comes to 2022. Otherwise, you're just a bunch of ineffectual losers.
Yeah, if they don't get rid of the filibuster, they're just going to do this. It's going to be a repeat of Obama, except with Biden in charge. So it's even worse.
What the fuck, y'all?
Well, that leads us to this like inherent contradiction of living as a leftist in a liberal era, as we're entering now, if you can call it that, like at least a capital L liberal era. Is that there are going to be like unequivocally good things that happen, and they're, you know, occasionally going to give us stuff that will be not nearly enough, but will be more than we thought we were going to get out of it, and that is like the perfect recipe for complacency.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, well, we didn't get what we needed, but we didn't expect to get shit, and we got something. So I mean, that's a real easy way to get caught. I don't know. I'm just concerned that we gained too little because we gained anything at all. You know,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What else you guys got? We can circle back. I can cut that out. We can circle back.
Stores here sell something called scented toilet paper. Now, when are you supposed to smell that stuff? I was doing it wrong for a long time.
I don't know if that one lands.
Yeah.
Most of these do not land.
It's like the stand-up set in The Joker.
Oh.
I want a shot-for-shot remake of that movie starring Yakov.
Starring Yakov Smirnoff. Now that would be a piece of fucking art, man.
The only thing that I have left is I would like to share my favorite is probably not the right word, but it's the one that made me want to jump off a building the most, hot liberal take from this week. I shared it in the group chat. It was, I want to call her out. It was at Melanie Ben. This is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever read. In my fantasies, Pete and Chasten will have Kamala and Dougie over for weekly potlucks that Michelle O will crash with a bottle of wine and gossip. What is she gonna go? Hold on. After which Dr. Jill and Joe bring the dogs over along with some homemade brownies to enjoy while they all sing karaoke. What is Michelle Obama gonna gossip about? Like, how many, like, unarmed, innocent civilians her husband drone strike? Like, what?
I mean, that would be hot party gossip.
I mean, they're friends with Jay-Z and Beyonce and shit. I'm sure that they rub elbows with all kinds of famous people that they could gossip about, you know.
Yeah. So,
but what's insane to me is that you don't even like write yourself into this fantasy.
Yeah, it's like even it's in like
your complete fantasy, and you don't even have like a proxy character for yourself in there.
Like you're not even the person delivering the pizza. Like what?
Yeah. You're not even the person who sold him the wine, anything. Yeah, you're still just fucking nobody.
You're a fan fiction writer.
You know, my ultimate fantasy is these chuckleheads fucking get to work and pass Medicare for all. That's my fantasy. I would love to not have to donate money to my friends' GoFundMe when they have minor accidents. I would love that. But yeah, I would love to hear about Kamala and Dougie.
Dougie.
Also,
where's Barack? Barack's out cheating in this scenario. That's.
He's compiling a playlist.
He's out movement killing.
Yeah.
He's got too many strikes to put down.
He's calling Instacart workers, telling how they shouldn't have unionized.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's okay. Well, all right. Oh, one more thing I wanted to shoehorn in here because I just saw it this morning, and that is Missouri is dead last in vaccine distribution. I just want to shoehorn that in here. We are dead last, 50th out of 50 for per capita virus or vaccine distribution. So,
but I want to say, folks, we're coming up on Idaho. We see you there at 48. We're gonna shoot up the chart past you.
Well, we were in 49th, so we're trending down. We can't trend down much worse. Yeah, we're behind Nevada, Idaho. You know, like the lists of like worsts, Missouri is usually in the bottom 10 in the last like decade of infant mortality, life expectancy, quality of life stuff. I mean, there are some things where we're like middle of the pack, but on critical things like education, stuff like that, we have been trending towards the bottom 10 for a while and flirting with those much maligned and shat upon states of like Mississippi, Louisiana, West Virginia, Kentucky, shit like that. And here we are now among them, but finally we have outdone them. And weird. West Virginia hell's like number 2, I think, on the list. They've
yeah.
I mean, granted, West Virginia and Alaska have like extremely sparse populations, but Alaska is also is the opposite of dense. Like some of the, you know, fortunately, maybe you don't have to worry as much about the refrigeration whenever it's fucking negative 40 degrees outside right now or whatever. But you still got to like fly planes to places to get, you know, vaccines into 15 people's arms or whatever. And, you know, I don't know. Missouri has major cities compared to West Virginia, and we can't figure out the infrastructure to just like blast people with these fucking shots. It's insane. It's evolving at a rate that it's going to, you know, that we're approaching step 1 again, I guess.
We have 2.3%, I think, of our population vaccinated in Missouri, and Alaska had 10%, and West Virginia had like 9 something, I think. So not.
It looks like Arkansas. I'm pulling from the Washington Post right now. It looks like we're not doing bad. It looks like we're in the top 20 But I think something that I'm looking at this is that of like the total allocated first doses. So Arkansas has 283,000 first allocated doses. Only 179,000 of those, meaning like 11.2% of the prioritized population and 5% of the state's population have been vaccinated. But thankfully, my mom does work at a hospital. She is fully vaccinated, so can't nobody kill Jackie.
Wait, is your mom Nurse Jackie?
No, she is not Nurse Jackie. She works in environmental services at the hospital, which also just like a huge shout out to anybody obviously working in healthcare right now. But I did not realize until I talked to my mom like how much she is having to do to keep the hospital like clean and safe, and they should absolutely be paying her more. So raise the minimum wage to more than $15 an hour, because whew.
As far as I'm concerned, the fight for 25 started the day that they said that they were going to raise it to 15.
Yeah. You know, I try not to engage in too many fights on Facebook.com anymore, because I'm trying to be a better person. I have been in more fights on Facebook this week about people who I know probably don't make $15 an hour opposing a $15 an hour minimum wage. And I'm like, y'all, what are you doing? Let's stand up for yourselves. Like, you deserve to make more money. Like, I shouldn't be having to gas you up like this. Like, sorry.
I mean, it's that whatever I'll butcher it, but that Steinbeck quote about Americans, you know, all just being temporarily embarrassed millionaires, you know. We're so bought into the American dream and shit that we, you know, internalize and relish the suffering because it makes our success all that more amazing instead of just fucking making sure that people can live all right.
Yeah.
And the people who are making more, who have gotten up the ladder, seem very content to kick people that are trying to climb up the ladder behind them. Like, once they get to the top, let's just push this ladder backwards and let it fall over.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little embarrassing, if we're being honest.
I mean, I worked my entire adult life until very recently under the $15 an hour mark, and I've finally cleared it pretty narrowly, and I just gotta say, I don't give a fuck, man. I hope burger flippers make as much an hour as I do. You know, like I've worked service industry jobs. I've worked on the line in a busy kitchen. Like the minute I started making more than $15 an hour, like my skills needed may be like more specialized, but I don't have to use them as nearly as often. I'm not as like under constant duress as I was working in kitchens or, you know, working manual labor and stuff. Like, just give me a fucking break. There's no such thing as a no skill job, you know. Like,
yeah, that's actually something I've touched on just a little bit, just like on Twitter and stuff. Is that it took me a lot of blood, sweat, tears, hard, shitty jobs, and now I'm thankful that, and it is a lot because I did work so hard that I am in a position now where I have a really great job, that I have benefits and I have a livable hourly wage. And just because I went through all of that doesn't mean that somebody else needs to. And I hate it when people will use that of like, well, I had to go through this, why shouldn't other people? It's like, man, I had to go through this, so I don't want anybody to have to go through it. Like, if you want to sell plasma just because like, man, I need an extra $40 so I can buy beer, yeah, then sell plasma. Don't fucking have to sell your plasma or your blood or whatever so you can fucking keep the lights on or feed your family, because that's some fucking dystopic shit that I don't want to fuck with anymore.
I used to lie at the 2 plasma centers in Springfield so that I could give up both. I mean, there were weeks where it's like at the end of the month, the to make rent, or I had to go fucking sell plasma like 4 times in 1 week.
Yeah, no,
plus work at Domino's for $8.05 an hour or whatever for 33 hours a week because they didn't want you to be a full-time employee.
Yep. Did the same shit, and I don't want anybody to do that. So, yeah, fucking raise the minimum wage. And I saw somebody tweet, they're like, man, if you are concerned about the price of a Big Mac going up, you probably need a raise too. So, like, let's just all admit that maybe our fucking people are underpaying us, and demand more.
And you shouldn't worry about the price of a Big Mac anyway, because basically it's what they serve in Russia. That's just called a bread sandwich with 2 slices of bread and bread in the middle.
Well, all of this brings us to the kind of a special episode this week. It is the beginning of the Biden era. Things are going to change, and it is unclear what way they're going to change. So I wanted to talk to folks who have skin in the game in organized labor and in waking working folks up. So I reached out to Douglas Williams, who is a labor educator, and to Bryan Conlon, who is a labor organizer, on the ground organizer. And I asked them a bunch of questions. And so the rest of the episode this week is just going to be an interview between me and folks that are a lot smarter and more have a lot more experience in this realm, and hopefully can actually leave this with some practical information, because we got into some of the practicalities of organizing on the job and etc. at the end of it. I hope you like it. This was very informative for me, and I think it will be for you. We will talk to you next week.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so today I am joined by Douglas Williams and Bryan Conlon. They are 2 Southern labor organizers and educators, and 2 of the editors of the radical labor publication Strikewave. Welcome to the show, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me.
Just a brief correction. I'm the organizer. Douglas is the educator.
Awesome. All right, thank you for clarifying.
I don't know how to educate, and Douglas doesn't know how to organize.
Hey, I've learned things from following you on Twitter over the years, man, for sure. And that's 2 reasons that I really wanted to talk to both of you is, one, because we're sitting kind of at a crossroads with labor. There's a lot going on the labor front in this country, both organized and unorganized. We're maybe just past what is like the nadir of labor power in this country. Things seem to be building again. Labor power seems to be building again. That's good. The late 90s, early 2000s seemed to be pretty fucking bleak period. But also union busting simultaneously is getting more innovative and adapting to that. And so that, it's kind of this yin and yang thing. And in the same way, we've got minimum wage increases passing by popular referendum around the country in various jurisdictions. And now we're looking at a push from the incoming Biden administration for a $15 an hour minimum. But also this gig economy is thriving and benefits greatly from sub-minimum wage, getting around minimum wage restrictions and stuff. And we have a incoming president and an incoming labor secretary who are ostensibly pretty close to labor. I know Marty Walsh from Boston grew up in the labor movement, and up until he became mayor, I think, was like president of his local. So he's like obviously like a old school strong labor type, and Biden at least has built his career off of a lot of the union stuff in Pennsylvania and Delaware, etc. But also he's filling his administration with a bunch of private equity and gig economy alums. So we have there's a lot of good news and there's a lot of bad news. So I kind of want to pick your brain about that. And also the second reason I wanted to have you on is because labor and tenant organizing really seem to be the way forward for building mass movement in the face of like climate change, state repression, this incipient reaction that we're seeing, and especially maybe in rural areas that don't respond as actively to social movements, or at least left-wing ones. Those are at least avenues toward power for the left in rural areas, is through organizing in labor and tenant spaces. So that's kind of an overview of where I'd like to spend time today. But I guess first we can start by like going back to the crossroads thing. Is what are the prospects? You know, what's the next 4 years look like on the labor front in the face of those questions?
I mean, it's kind of tough to say at the moment. Like, it's still really early days. Labor is essentially committing full bore to trying to get the PRO Act, which is Protect Our Rights to Organize Act, passed as soon as possible. I think there's sort of a generalized consensus that labor waited too long when Obama had control of the Senate and the House, and was in the White House in his first term, that to pass the Employee Free Choice Act. PRO, in a lot of ways, is a much better bill than EFCA was. But I think one of the things we're going to have to come to terms with is you're seeing the Supreme Court upend decades of labor law precedent. The most prominent and the most obvious one is obviously the Janus v. AFSCME lawsuit that required all public sector unions to be open shop, which means that non-members are still fully represented by the union whether they pay dues or not. But the reasoning behind it is a kind of reasoning that, if taken to its furthest extent, is essentially like a return to the Lochner era of freedom of contract, where, you know, you could even basically say freedom of speech requires, if money's speech, then, you know, requiring minimum wage is an imposition on freedom of speech. If you think about it and you aren't a shrieking right-wing hack, for more than 30 seconds, you might give yourself a stroke. But like, that's the concern, that sort of First Amendment Lochnerism, and I'm not the person who originated this, is something that is definitely of concern. Like, the thing I'm worried about is if there is sort of, if PRO passes and what's called right to work goes away, and you're allowed to have union security clauses in union contracts moving forward. The thing I'm concerned about is, you know, in a 6-3 decision, basically the open shop gets brought to every union. And eventually, like, I'm concerned that sort of the fundamental underpinnings of collective bargaining, which is exclusive representation, that gets attacked as well. In the next I'd say next 5 to 10 years, like, there's probably going to be a fairly serious legal challenge against exclusive representation that might get sustained depending on what happens in the Supreme Court. As far as organizing goes, I mean, stuff has been kicking off everywhere. Like, there's been a huge amount of spontaneous organizing efforts that have popped up, and a lot of unions are doing really well in their organizing, but it's a challenge. It's never easy. And in this environment, particularly with how precarious everything is, you know, I think one of the priorities, like, long-term, this is something that Sean Richman and Moshe Marvit have been advocating for quite some time, is ending at-will employment nationwide and requiring just cause termination for every worker, which would give a lot of protection to union organizing drives, but it also gives us an opportunity to organize the unorganized by, you know, helping represent people in those kinds of employment tribunal situations.
So to sort of piggyback onto that, so when Bryan refers to the Lochner era and Lochnerism, we should be very specific about what he is referring to as a Supreme Court decision, Lochner v. New York in 1905, where the Supreme Court struck down a New York law that limited the workday to 10 hours a day and 60 hours a week. And, struck that down on the basis of it being, quote, an unreasonable, unnecessary, and arbitrary interference with the right and liberty of the individual to contract, right? So, when we are talking about the ways in which the Supreme Court could possibly go, this is a very serious challenge, right, to labor and the labor movement. The National Labor Relations Board has also been very unfriendly to us over the past 4 years, even to the extent of wanting to ban Scabby the Rat. Right? I mean, that sounds crazy, but it is, something they say, oh, it's an intimidation of, the employer's right to free speech and labor management relations and stuff like that, as if, disciplining people and firing people in the middle of a union campaign is not also a form of intimidation, right? But that seems to be okay. As far as where we are in organizing, so I am worried about the Supreme Court, but I think we have a couple of things going in our favor. For one, I think the last 4 years, and this has been accelerated during the pandemic, right? What we've seen is a greater awareness, of inequality and the way that people's labor is undervalued or unvalued, right? And that is something that goes across the board. Let's think about the referendum in Missouri, right, to repeal the right to work law that was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor. One of the things I used to tell rank and file members about when I did education about this, I said, listen, always ask them if they know where Cape Girardeau County, Missouri is. And, some of the people raise their hand, particularly they're from Missouri, and I asked them, I'm like, do you know what the name of the United States Federal Courthouse is in Cape Girardeau County? And no one ever raised their hands. I'm like, well, the name of the U.S. Federal Courthouse is the Rush Hudson Limbaugh Sr. United States Federal Courthouse. His grandfather...
Man, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, his grandfather was a federal judge, right? And in Cape Girardeau County, I believe right to work passed in that county during the referendum by like 15 votes. So in quite possibly the most conservative county in the state, we essentially fought them to a draw, right? And that's, I think that is something that might have been unimaginable, 5 to 10 years ago. And so I think that's something for us to look at going forward as a possible sort of, thing in our corner, that more people are understanding that they are being undervalued or not valued at all by their employer, where we have to come in and say, okay, and also this is why you need a union, right? Because we help to give you that dignity and that respect back through increased wages, increased, protections on the job and stuff like that. So it's not just about you need a union because of the money, right? It's also you need a union because you have access to things that make your workplace democratic. Unions is democracy, right? Extended to the workplace. And that's how we have to carry it going forward.
And the other thing I'd add is safety issues are taking on a particular emphasis with the plague. Like one of the best things that Strikewave's done is an ongoing OSHA tracker, basically where we have a bot that tweets out all of the OSHA complaints that are filed about COVID that have been filed since the start of the pandemic. The failures of all levels of government to sufficiently mitigate and address the pandemic has a body count attached to it. And unfortunately the predominant number of complaints to OSHA are done through union job sites. If I don't have firm numbers here, but when you look at the Twitter feed for the bot, which is, let me find it real quick. It's working W COVID. When you take a look, you'll see, oh, this is a post office. Oh, this is a government employee, a UPS facility. These are places that already have unions, which helps people actually file those OSHA complaints and make sure that they don't get retaliated against. Part of the problem and part of the reason why the American worker is so fucked is because basically they live and die at the whim of their boss. If your boss says, I don't like your beard, you need to shave it off, what can you do? You can either find a new job, or unless it's because you're part of a protected class, if Douglas had, he got a haircut recently, but before that he had an absolutely magnificent afro, right? And so if his boss told him to shave off his afro, that might fall underneath violation of the Civil Rights Act, which would be a case for the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, because black associated hair, hair that's associated with black folks, is something that's going to be part of the protected class, right? But if you're not that, you don't have the right to push back against that. If they don't like the fact that your hair color, if you have an unnatural color, it's little simple things like that prevent you from actually expressing who you are as a person, and gives your boss too much power over your life. That's ultimately making sure that people have the right to live in safety and with some dignity is ultimately the key focus of all of our organizing work.
Right. Yeah, that dignity part is so important. I mean, I spent 15 years old to 26 or 27 working mostly in food service, and
ain't no dignity in food service.
There's no dignity in food service. And that's that's for me, that's something that I'm interested in, and maybe I'll pick your brains on this here in a little bit, but I'm interested in how do we organize restaurants, man?
Very carefully.
Yes. Well, after over a decade in that industry, man, it was soul crushing. But I have so many friends who are still in their 30s making a living doing it. But there's the only way to really get to a place of dignity and safety and security in a restaurant is just to luck the fuck out. Is to find a place where the owners treat you right. And even then, you're still totally at their whim as to whether or not they're going to continue to treat you right. So,
or you become a manager. Or
you become a manager, yeah.
And then you end up being the person that does the persecuting.
Absolutely. So, I guess since we're talking about the service industry, there's not a whole lot of details out yet, but how do you all feel about the including the $15 per hour minimum wage in this COVID relief bill?
I hope to God it manages to survive assessment by like the parliamentarians, so it can be included in reconciliation. Because otherwise, there ain't no fucking way it passes. Otherwise,
right. That is the question: is if they can get it in the bill to where that they can get the bill to reconciliation and they can get just a bare majority, they may get this thing passed. But if this needs 60 votes, then it's dead in the water because these Republicans have an absolute hard-on for $7.25 an hour. What is that? The federal currently?
That's the federal minimum wage. I mean, and look, like this is something where sort of the Democratic leadership has been just absolutely fucking like unforgivably incompetent. Like, and it makes it clear like what their actual priorities are. They live in terror of the notion of the small business tyrant, right?
Right.
Like, and they're worried about alienating them anymore when, a fair chunk of them just tried to fucking like overturn the results of an election through an abortive fucking coup, but that's another topic for 5 hours later. But that fear of this specific constituency has kept them from embracing what is obviously smart politics. Claire McCaskill went down in flames in the same election that the open shop referendum in Missouri was defeated. Like, McCaskill...
And we expanded minimum wage, if not 18, then 2016. I think it was 18. I think it was that same election. And we passed medical marijuana in that same election.
And it's similar story in Florida. Similar story in Arkansas. In places where the Democrats are struggling to just barely keep their head above water, like, they should absolutely be aggressive and embracing like higher minimum wage as a way to get people to vote. But because they're still stuck in sort of a late 80s, 90s mindset of, we have to cater to the affluent and majority white middle class, like, they're completely like fucking the dog on this, and they're like, and it's costing them elections.
And for me, I think the reason why you're able to see the passage of these referendums is precisely because they are divorced from partisan politics, right? See, here's the thing. I mean, yeah, is a Democratic Senate or House or President better than the alternative? I mean, sure. I mean, and to me, that better is marginal, particularly when we look at the last 30 plus years of Democratic politics, right? But what you find is that when people have an opportunity to assess these issues absent partisan considerations, right? If they can just look at something like right to work or the open shop, or look at medical marijuana, or look at the expansion of Medicaid, and they can look at these issues and say, okay, so this is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is quite literally a me issue, right? Like, I personally benefit, my neighbor personally benefits from this stuff. And we get the opportunity. I mean, this is something that can't be understated. When we have these referendums, we get the opportunity to go out and do popular education. Right? We are Missouri, the anti-right to work side backed by unions and the NAACP. We were able to go out and educate people about, listen, there's a reason that Rex Sinkfield and his millionaire and billionaire cronies are spending so much money trying to defeat this, right? And it's because they want to pay you less. They want you to have less democracy at work. They want you to be less safe at work. And this is why we're standing up for you in this, right? And as you saw, nearly 1 million Missourians said, yeah, that sounds about right to me, right? Like, right. And so that's, to me, Democrats are going to do what Democrats do, which is appeal to this mythical voter in the middle, which doesn't make any sense anyway, because we're in a far more polarized sort of electorate than we've ever been before, right? But, Democrats are going to do that. It's on us as organizers and educators and people on the ground in the labor movement to push these things forward, regardless of whether we have backing from a political party to do so or not.
Agreed.
I mean, playing inside the inside game is honestly at this point just a waste of time. Like, we need to be building the outside game more aggressively than anything else.
That brings me to a question I've had for a while, and it seems like Confederated labor has been getting a pushback, especially from more radical organizers over the last 5 or 6 years. There's a lot of I know that there are a lot of locals calling on AFL-CIO to drop the cops, which AFL-CIO keeps just ignoring. But I'm curious how y'all think, what y'all think about independent labor and working outside of the rules, wildcats. I mean, just how you feel about working outside of the traditional forms of labor organizing that have kind of dominated the 20th century moving forward.
So I am, look, as anybody will tell you, about me personally, I'm agnostic on tactics. If it works, right, then it works, and we should assess whether it's working. If it's not working, then we should reassess whether to do a certain thing, right? Here's my thing about doing things outside of the so let's just take the conversation. This is a constant conversation you see on social media and all that stuff about the general strike. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So look, me personally, I would love for there to be a general strike. We all walk off the job, we bring capital to its knees, and we secure not just gains for workers who are already unionized, but gains for workers across the board, and honestly start building towards a new, better, post-capitalist sort of society, right? That said, when we talk about these things, we also have to think about what would it take in order to make this happen, right? So you'd probably need the support of rank and filers and labor in the airline industry, right? In order to sort of shut down the ability of corporations to import their goods and stuff like that. You'd probably need support from the longshore unions. Yeah, and all of that stuff. These are things that take a really, 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 really long time to build those relationships with labor, and not just, the random rank and filer that you may know working in a particular industry, but also with local lodge leadership, with regional leadership. And what I see a lot is a lot of people who propose very wide and sweeping sort of actions, but have not done that work in order to lay the groundwork for it to be successful. You know what? Wildcat strike, we saw it was successful in West Virginia.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's probably the most inspiring recent example of it. The teacher strike in West Virginia in 2018. Is that
yes?
But there's
3 years ago now.
But there's a complication with that specific case. Like, it wasn't just a strike of the teachers. Like, they were able to apply sufficient pressure to get all of the superintendents in the state to shut down schools. None of the teachers during that strike lost a day's worth of pay because the superintendents closed the school. Like, so it doesn't discount or undermine the diligent and hard organizing work that went into this particular victory and all of the fighting that's happened after it, right? But like, that situation, you're never in the case of a big grand general strike, you're never going to get permission slips from all of the bosses in the country to agree for everybody to walk out and still get paid for it.
Right. I mean, mutual aid would be absolutely crucial. You know, we'd have to be taking care of each other. You know,
and this is where sort of I get the critiques of institutional labor, right? Like, and this is something that Douglas and I, being like creatures of institutional labor, like people who are involved in the movement through institutional labor, like the movement ain't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it isn't about sort of what's right. It's about what kind of resources and what kind of logistics you can pull together to sustain struggle. Like,
right.
I'm all fine. Like there's plenty of good people trying to organize underneath the auspices of the IWW. I have my own opinions about that, formed with specific experience of trying to organize underneath the IWW. I wish them the best of luck, but I don't see a way forward for them because they don't have any specific sort of structure in place to actually build to sustain struggle. Like, and this is a historic issue with the Wobblies. Like, the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts, like a year later after its victory, it basically went back to the way things were before. So, like,
well, and I think sort of, you know, when you talk about mutual aid, I mean, listen, let's be very honest about this, right? The largest socialist organization in the country, we actually have to have like debates about about whether mutual aid is something that we should be committing to. And that's, I mean, the fact that we even have to have this debate on the socialist left, right? To say nothing.
Especially now. Especially now in the face of pandemic, mass unemployment, evictions, like to even entertain that debate to me is insane. But yeah,
I mean, that's
I didn't mean to derail you.
Oh no! I mean, absolutely. I mean, but this is sort of, these are the challenges that we face when we talk about sort of coloring outside of the lines, right? With our actions is, you know, you read about any strike, you know, Fisher sit-down strikes, the 1934 Teamster strike. You read about any of these historic, world-beating, sort of society-changing labor actions, and in the background were people cooking the food. In the background were, you know, women, you know, cooking the food, you know, running, you know, messages between different parts of the, you know, strike committees and doing all of that stuff. And, without that sort of mutual aid structure in place, what we're talking about is, and I hate to use this term because it's used against, the far left sort of so much, but what you're talking about isn't, direct action, it's adventurism. And we should absolutely understand the difference, right? So
Right. Well, I mean, y'all are Southern. You have communist in your bio on Twitter. Like, I mean, you have to find that line of adventurism in anything we do on the left, lest we end up like Greensboro. Like you gotta.
I mean, you have to be arrogant enough to believe you can uproot a system of social control that has existed essentially continuously for 300 years at a minimum, and humble enough to realize that you can't do it on your own.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the tough part. Like, you've got to ride that particular contradiction as far as you possibly can, and sometimes like you make it and sometimes you fall off the edge.
So speaking of action and everything we've been talking about, I guess something that would be, I think, maybe helpful for me and maybe some of the folks that listen to this show is maybe taking like a specific example. Say like I've been working at the Dollar General in like Bolivar, Missouri for the last year, right? There's maybe two Dollar Generals in Bolivar. There's maybe, well, hell, any town that's big enough to have more than one public-facing business in this state, or at least in the Ozarks now, has a Dollar General. So there's like thousands of Dollar Generals, but I probably only have like 8 coworkers and 2 managers. Like, what can I do in a small retail or with a chain like that, or even in the face of small business tyrants? What can I do to organize a small workplace in a reactionary and pretty anti-union area? Let me preface by saying the Ozarks are a lot like Appalachia culturally, except we're missing that crucial period from like 1880 to 1935 of like shooting at scabs and mine guards and shit. So
yeah, I mean, again, y'all just didn't have like coal to the same extent, right? Where you had those kinds of concentrated industrial workforces.
Right.
I mean, like, the tough part is because of the nature of these kinds of big chains, which might as well just be giant straws that suck capital out of these communities and never return them.
Right.
Like, if you successfully organized at your Dollar General locally, those 2 Dollar Generals locally in you said Bolivar, right?
Right.
If you organize those 2 and you got them to an election, a union election, and you won it, they would close the 2 stores. Like, Walmart is notorious about this. They absolutely 100%, like, when in Canada, a group of meat cutters organized, they basically got rid of the meat cutting program on site across the entire company in Canada and shifted it over to prepackaged meat that they shipped out to the store. Same thing would apply here. Like, the last thing any of these big chains wants is a contagion. Like, if you organize those small stores, eventually people are going to start getting ideas. So it's better to burn that out and forego the little bit of money that you might get by draining this particular community dry than it is to run the risk of having people go, yeah, we won this, right?
Right.
Like, the very last thing any of these companies are going to look to do is piss that off. Now, that said, like, rural communities, like, there's going to be plenty of rural communities that have some proximity to industrial facilities, right? Like, that's one of the things that happened when you saw outsourcing from the north to the south, is they frequently targeted small towns because they wanted to recreate, like big business wanted to recreate the old company town dynamic without being explicitly company towns. There's a really good piece titled Losing Sparta that kind of talks about a Philips Electric plant that's organized with IBEW, kind of talking about that dynamic. So the key more than anything else is if you're looking to organize on your workplace, like, you need to figure out, one, like, what are you looking to achieve? Like, if it's full unionization, high likelihood, depending on what the company is, they would rather see your particular store burn than they ever would want to fucking allow you to have a chance to win. But if it's something short of that, if it's just looking to get rid of a bad manager, that's something that you might actually have a shot at winning.
So I do want to correct my brother from another mother here. The meat cutters were actually in Jacksonville, Texas, when they...
Oh, you're right. It wasn't in Canada. Damn it.
When they organized with UFCW, and then afterwards they went to prepackaged meat. What did happen in Canada and Quebec specifically, they organized a Walmart shop wall to wall in Jonquière, Quebec, and what ended up happening, this is a brand new store, and Walmart just ended up closing the store immediately.
Man.
And putting the building up for sale, right?
Laid off everybody there, hired a whole new workforce. Yeah.
And so, when it comes to big box sort of stores and massive chains like that, that is more than likely going to repeat itself, right? Unless you undergo a national campaign, right? And, that would present challenges, obviously, in and of itself. Now, I mean, if we're talking about a local, sort of food store and stuff like that, I mean, you've seen diners that have organized, I believe it was the IWW that was the lead behind the Burgerville Union, right? You have the Anchor Bar in San Francisco that also organized. So I think if the small to mid-size sort of stores that are most susceptible to worker action and unionization aren't necessarily your local Dollar General, but your local diner or your local distillery, right? Where there's less of a risk of capital flight, essentially, right?
And those big chains too, like, it, not that it isn't important to organize them, right? But like, the store by store approach ain't gonna work. Like, you have to target their logistics chain. Like, Starbucks, which I used to work at, it has thousands of stores. And if you go store by store, they will eventually firewall you, contain the campaign, and eventually choke it off. But if you target and successfully target their 4 roasting plants, which sends shipments twice a week to every single store, like, that's the center of gravity of the entire operation. So
going upstream allows you to focus on a smaller workforce to greater effect, right?
And the company knows this. Like, all these companies know this for a fact. Like the Walmart logistics operation probably has one of the most sophisticated surveillance systems of workers that you can probably ever encounter. And they also, compared to how they treat Walmart workers in the stores, they probably pay the core logistics personnel like better than they pay the people in the stores. Because
I've known people who worked for Walmart corporate and they made a nice chunk.
Yeah.
they were not, 40% of them were not applying for food stamps
No.
every year, you know.
And that's the thing that's kind of key to think about it. Like it isn't about like whether it's right or not to organize people. Like one of the criticisms that you hear levied at institutional labor is that we tend not to organize as aggressively as we should. And the thing is, I field probably, like, I would say 3 or 4 serious inquiries about what it takes to organize every single month. But the thing is, you need to make sure people understand like what it's going to take to do this, and a lot of and when people are serious about it, I make sure to connect them up to organizers and other unions to sort of see what they can do, right? But that's the tough part. Like everybody wants to be organized, but there's a lot of people who don't want to put in the work to do the organizing. And there's a balance here. Like you can't, like, we have limited resources. So what's the best way we can grow the union for the amount of resources that we have? Like that's the priority. It's a question of power and where we can commit our resources more than anything else.
So, say a intrepid and politically active communist line chef is listening to this right now, works in a restaurant, independently owned restaurant with like 20 coworkers. Where would you send them if they were serious?
The first thing I tell them to do is pull together a list of all of the employees and contact info. Like, list work is always the start of any kind of organizing effort.
And is that you start building out a map from there of the social relationships between these people, or? Exactly.
You build out a map of social relationships. You identify like who is the snitch. You identify
find that one out early, right?
Yeah, you want to know that one out early. You also, the other thing is like the next group of people you want to try to co-opt are the people who sell the pot, because they know everybody and they have everybody's phone number. So if you might not necessarily want to make those folks into your core leaders on an organizing campaign, but they are useful folks to have on your side because they're the ones that have contact with everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's a built-in network right there for sure.
Yeah, like you want, like, really more than anything else, like organizing is about relationships and leveraging relationships more than anything else. If there's one thing that the past 2 years can teach that should have taught everybody, it's all about like relational organizing is genuinely the key to building stuff that's durable.
And especially if you're talking about organizing in the South, I mean, you in particular have to be, have to put relational organizing at the forefront. You have to understand not only what are the workers' connections to one another, what are the workers' connections to their community, right? Mm-hmm. Is there, what churches do they go to? What organizations do they volunteer for? What's the local watering hole where a lot of these people gather, right? Because, union organizing at its best is community organizing. Period, end of story. And we cannot divorce the workplace from the communities in which these workers and the workplace itself, come out of. And that is something that I think a lot of labor is, they're getting it. You get your ass kicked in the South for long enough, you'll get it one way or the other. So.
All right. Well, do y'all have any final thoughts you want to leave us on?
Got a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah.
That's the ugly fact. Like, we got a lot of work ahead of us.
Well, man, I appreciate it being honest about it, because I'm over optimism in 2021, man. I ain't wasting any more fucking time or bandwidth on hope, because I can't handle the disappointment anymore. So
let me leave you with something that I've been mulling around a little bit. You gotta attach your organizing work to something more durable in how it makes you feel. Like, that chasing that feeling is good, but feelings change, and they are fickle things. They fade, and they curdle, and eventually they go away.
But the work remains.
But the work is still there. So you gotta anchor your work to something much more sustainable. What does it for me, and it might not do it for everybody else, is the notion of duty. Like, I've got a duty to my union brothers and sisters. I got a duty to the union I work for. I got a duty to my comrades to fight alongside them as long as I can, as much as I can, to do everything I can in support, and that keeps me going when times are dark, and sometimes it's hard to face the day. Like, that's what keeps me moving one foot in front of the other. Like, the work does not care about you and does not require you to feel. Like, it just requires you to move forward. And that's what keeps me going even when stuff is hard.
That's good, man. That's good.
Similar for me, I grew up working class 8 minutes from a swamp in rural Virginia, and, one thing that I can say is that the thing that's always kept me going was knowing the effect that labor and that solidarity, that the effect it had on my family, myself, and my community. And, one thing is for certain: you have to root this, as Bryan said, in something more than feelings. So root it in your neighbor, root it in your family member, root it in your community, root it in the idea that we are not fighting for ephemera or something in the air, but we're actually fighting for the dignity and worth of actual human beings who depend on us to get this shit right, or, we'll all be down the same rabbit hole, and our grandchildren will be doing podcasts just like this, wondering what they have to do. How do we do it?
I admire Douglas's optimism here, because our grandkids, if we don't get this shit right, they ain't gonna be doing podcasts, because there ain't gonna be fucking anything to do podcasts with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I'm a 100% climate doomer, man. I'm looking towards the future, and it's scary, and that's why I'm interested in organizing conversations and building that solidarity and mutual aid networks and building power for people, because there's dark fucking days ahead, man. So, you guys have anything you want to plug? If you want to tell us a little bit about Strikewave, or
basically, Strikewave is, we really, 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 really got sick and tired of good labor writers not being able to get paid to write good stuff. And so we kicked together Strikewave, and we've done 2 fundraisers, and now we've got a monthly sustainer program. Like, we want to cover the full breadth of labor as much as possible. So we'll do things like we'll pay Kim Kelly to write about the Freak Show, because like before the ADA and reasonable accommodations and all these other things, like for people with disabilities, this was a way for them to make a living. We'll pay, good pay to talented writers who write about all of labor to share this and to publish it. We just launched a monthly sustainer program. You can find that. We're going to be tweeting out links to it probably. I'll make sure to get you a link so you can include it with the show notes or whatever.
Yeah, please do.
But basically what we're all about is we want to make sure that we're telling, good stories and worthwhile stories about what's happening in the working world here. And we want to make sure, the people who write for us are able to pay their rent and afford medicine. And we need money to do that. And that's why we've launched the program. And so far we've been fairly successful. We're very proud of the work we put out. We put out great pieces like a brief history of labor struggles in professional basketball, from a first-time writer. And it's an exceptional piece. But yeah, that's basically what we're looking to plug. Check us out.
Cool. Yeah, I've read a few articles from Strikewave, and I'm really impressed with what y'all are doing over there. So that's great, folks. Please check that out. I have one last ask, and then I'll let y'all go. Douglas, can you give us the fist speech?
So there's a good story. So this has bona fide, organized the South heritage. Somebody who's involved with the UFCW campaign at Smithfield Foods in Tar Heel, North Carolina, came up with this, and I passed it along to Douglas, and he refined it and added his own spin onto it. It's a brilliant speech, and it's even better than what I came up with.
So, what is labor? Labor is your hand, okay? So labor law, it is your pinky finger. It's important, but it is insufficient all on its own. Your ring finger, this is the commitment that you make to your work, to your fellow workers, to your community, and to your brothers and sisters in the labor movement. Your pointer finger is what you use to point out injustice. Your middle finger, that is direct action, right? But these 4 fingers together, it's nothing but a slap on the wrist. You need the thumb, which is solidarity. But listen, what happens when you punch with your thumb inside of your fist? You will break it, right? You will break your solidarity if it is not public facing for all to see. If people do not feel your solidarity, we've never won a union campaign anywhere ever with private solidarity. We've won it standing shoulder to shoulder together as members of a working class, fighting for a better world for our fellow co-workers, our communities, and future generations. And this is the fist of solidarity that has powered the working class since God knows when, and it will remain that way. So get out there, organize your brothers and sisters, get out there, do good by your communities, and the work never stops, and let's keep fighting.
Man, it's just enough fuel to fight another day. I'll tell you what, man. Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Creek and walls, take a tram. I'm gonna tell you a pretty folly.